This is the School Leadership Show, the only podcast dedicated to helping practicing and aspiring school leaders improve their craft. The School Leadership Show brings together thought leaders from inside and outside of education to deliver you the insights and tools you need to succeed in school leadership. In this episode, I talk with Dr. Stephanie Evergreen for a second time. Stephanie and I talked first in 2015. And I'm still one of her biggest fans. Her books, Presenting Data Effectively and Effective Data Visualization, are must-haves for any leader who uses data. And let's face it, what leader doesn't use data? We talk about the trends she's seeing in the world of presentations and data visualization. We also get into her 1-3-25 report format, creating better handouts, qualitative data, so much more. There's a couple of links in the show notes that Stephanie mentioned during the interview, and you can learn more about Stephanie and all of her work with Evergreen Data at stephanieevergreen.com. Enjoy this interview with Dr. Stephanie Evergreen. I'm here with Stephanie Evergreen. Stephanie, how's it going?
I'm so good. How are you?
I am spectacular. And, you know, I get all fangirl on you, or fanboy, I guess, when I get to talk to you. So we were chatting before we started that it's been just about 3 years since we had a podcast interview. So let's find out what's going on.
Yeah, let's. It's been time flies. I'm sure lots has changed since then. So yeah.
So what have you been working on? You got some books, right? Some new books.
Yes.
Let's talk about those.
Yeah. So in the past 3 years, my first book, Presenting Data Effectively, came out in a second edition, which was really nice because my publisher decided we could officially use color now, which is awesome when you're trying to talk about presentations. So that book is in full color, and I ended up adding in a lot more stuff about effective reporting. I introduced things like the 1-3-25 reporting model and how we should flip the order that we normally talk about stuff so that we get to the bottom line first. And I showed people how to use slides as handouts and things like that. And then that came out last year. And then right now I'm working on the second edition of my other book, Effective Data Visualization. I'm in the throes of that right now. So I'm up to my eyeballs in rewrites. And it's fun because I'm adding in new graph types, which I kind of thought I had included them all last time, but there are more. And I shortened up some instructions, and I have a whole new chapter in there about dashboards. And we're adding in more content about how to expand that conversation on how hard it can be to change the culture of communication, especially in large companies, because, you know, we can learn how to do this stuff well, but if our boss doesn't want it or our boss's boss doesn't want it, then what's the point, you know?
Wow. So, okay, there's a lot of places I'm ready to go after that.
Yeah, cool.
So
let's do it.
Well, first of all, if people want to find your book, just Amazon, is that the best way?
That's right.
Okay, cool. And I will link to both books in the show notes so people can find them quicker if they want to go that way. So let's start kind of where you left off. Let's talk about the culture of communication within an organization, because I've bumped into this in different organizations that I've either worked in or have given presentations to, this idea of, well, no, that's not how we do it here.
That's right. Yeah, and it's hard to change that, you know, and I find that the larger the organization and the older the organization, the more that culture is entrenched and harder to uproot. So it can be really difficult. And I actually think sometimes people say their boss wouldn't want it or their boss's boss wouldn't want it as a way to excuse themselves from having to actually make change. I don't think that the upper management would be that turned off by the idea, because if you think about it, the decision makers at the top of the company, they want this stuff. They want visuals that they can just understand at a glance, and they want to cut to the chase. You know, they got to go make decisions off of this stuff. So if you think about it, in their culture of decision making, they need this new way of reporting. But sometimes it's like an intermediary boss or our own hang-ups that keep us from actually going forth and making some change. So sometimes what's helpful, I don't know if you've ever tried this, Mike, but at the beginning of a consulting gig or a workshop, I'll have the boss come in and say something to address the crowd. You know, I was giving a workshop with Verizon's Rising Senior Leadership. And the COO came in the room and gave this great talk about how this is what they wanted, that he told them he wanted to see slides that had a fact at the top, like a claim, and then the visual evidence that supports that claim. He said, this is the structure that we need in order to make decisions in our review meetings. And this is the new way that you should be reporting. And this workshop is going to teach you how to do it. So it was a great intro for me, but it just let the room have license to come with me, you know?
That's awesome. And definitely getting the senior leadership on board at the beginning is huge. And I feel like even if you get there, then I bump into sometimes the argument of, well, you know, I don't have time to make the slides pretty, is what people will say to me.
Mm-hmm.
How do you respond to the time thing?
Yeah, and I do think that's something that people are looking for, because I feel like a lot of people are in a situation where they might not necessarily be the data collector. You know, you think about like a superintendent in a school district is not the primary data collector. They're being fed the data by somebody else, but they've got to turn around in like 24 hours and present it to the board in a way that's understandable. So they're like, yeah, I'm not going to find a cool stock photo for each one of my slides. It's just not going to happen. I get that. Everybody's looking for something that's efficient. But I do think it's possible, you know, especially if we know we're going to have slides we have to present to the board every quarter, then we ought to be able to work on those things when it isn't the last minute. You know, we already kind of have a sense of the stuff we're going to have to plug in. So I encourage people to do like skeleton slides or a skeleton report where you got all the placeholders there. You can just tweak the final pieces once you get the correct data.
Yes, I found that to be very effective. And then once you've done it one year, particularly in school districts, you present the same things around the same time each year. And then once you've got that skeleton and you've put a little bit of work in up front when it's not busy, then you can slug the data in and it's a little easier.
Agreed. And, you know, the more you do it, the longer or the less time it takes. I mean, when I walk people in my workshops through how to make a dot plot, the first time we do it, it takes like 25 minutes because I'm teaching them about all new brand new parts of Excel they've never seen before and how to make them work. But once you're quick at it, like when I'm making dot plots here at my computer, it takes me 4 minutes from start to finish. So I think that more practice helps. And, you know, saving things as templates, like you're saying, that saves us so much time.
So you mentioned something when you were talking about rewrites for the book. So something about slides as handouts. Will you say more about that?
Yeah. So it's this way of using PowerPoint that I know many people have not really thought about before, but it's where we use the notes section of PowerPoint as a handout. Because what I see people do otherwise is they're in situations where they have to present slides, or they think they do, and the slides have to be left behind or sent ahead. So people try to make the slides do double duty, right? They'll put all the words on the slides, and when we do that, we write in a very weird language. We adopt this like bullet point speak that isn't full sentence, you know what I mean? And so nobody can actually read that later and make sense of it. And then the words we have on the slide are like size 14, which is too small for a presentation and too large to be a written document that people read later. So when we do that, it's like this lose-lose situation, you know? So what I've been encouraging people to do is use the notes section. I mean, we often use that as a speaker. You'd use that for yourself, notes to yourself. But what if we used it for the audience and we took all the text off the slides and put it down in the notes section? And then it's like, you know, size 11 in a font that's readable and it's full sentences. So it's like an actual narrative. And we can actually do a tiny bit of formatting to those notes pages so they look professional, not just like the typical way PowerPoint would format those things. And then we're in a win-win because we have this liberty to have beautiful, clean slides and also full written out notes that can double as handouts.
It's so funny that you mentioned that because I've been using that strategy as kind of I started it as a bridge to try to get people comfortable with the idea of changing up the slides to be able to say, okay, to put all the words down here. And I found exactly that it makes a really nice handout.
It totally does, yeah. And I mean, like I said, just a little bit of polish, like a tiny bit of page layout or graphic design can take it from something that looks amateur to something that looks amazing. And I just think most people don't know that you can use your notes pages that way. So when we show people, it tends to just kind of blow their minds, and it's a real game changer for people.
Well, that, and it also takes away that, well, I don't have time to make a different handout from my slides. It's like one or the other. But this way, it's both. In fact, when I've tried to help people with it, I'll say, go ahead and either give me a presentation that you've done before, and then we kind of remake it by moving all the text down into there. Or I'll say, okay, make your quote unquote normal slides how you normally would, and then we go back and do it.
I love that idea. And that also gets to the efficiency that I think people are really looking for at this point in their lives. Like, it's great if you have the luxury to make an actual separate standalone handout. And I do that a lot in my own work, but sometimes that's just not going to be the case. So this is another shortcut people can use.
So you and I get this, and probably some of the people listening, I hope, because we've talked before about it. But you mentioned getting the leadership on board in organizations. What else are you finding? Is there anything specific that you find like people are still struggling with, or that you're seeing as you're out and about consulting and working with clients that, oh man, like it just makes you shake your head, like where people are still doing what?
Yeah, I think one of the places I see a lot of resistance is making the title of the slide or the graph the claim or the fact. People I find really still struggling with this, even if in theory they're like, oh yes, it makes this so much more understandable, because it does, because you're telling people your point.
Exactly.
When I make them actually do it, they cannot. They just really struggle, because we've never been taught in school to have a point. We've always been taught to just put the data out there, be objective, let your audience come to their own conclusions. But they don't want to do that. Like, they've actually hired us to tell them the answer. So we need to just tell them the answer. And when I push people on this, they end up saying things like, well, the point of this graph is to show the data. And I'm like, that's not a point. That's not a point. Nobody wants to just be shown data. The title of the slide or the title of the graph actually has to be the point of the data, the thing you want them to walk away with, the conclusion you want them to draw.
Exactly.
Data. So I find people still really struggling with that. Or I can get them to make a sentence, but it won't look like a sentence. Every word will be capitalized, or I'll get them to make a sentence, but they cannot put a period at the end. Like, there are just some resistance I still see all over the place with just making that title a fact.
And it is so powerful. And I feel like it's an important part of preparation, because if you don't know the point of the slide well enough to declare it in a title, I don't know. I feel like it's going to be harder to present it.
Oh, that's such a good point. Like, this is actually you doing your job, right? Like, you need to be prepared for your presentation. You need to know what you're going to say. And I can sometimes get people to give me the point if I just have a conversation with them. Like, what would you be saying about this slide? They'll start talking, and I'm like, boom, there's your point. You just need to write out those words as the title. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned another thing, too. There's 1-3-25 reporting. What's that all about?
Yeah, so I've been encouraging people to adopt this 1-3-25 model, which is just a structure for thinking about how we're going to disseminate our work. It means a 1-page handout, a 3-page executive summary, a 25-page report, and then as many appendices as you want. So this is really a model geared toward people who do those full reports. And I don't know that I see a lot of that happening at like the school level, but I have a lot of federal clients who are producing these like 300-page reports,
Ugh.
And they know no one's getting through it. So I encourage them to use this 1-3-25 model so that we give people the amount of information that they're ready to digest when they're ready to digest it, without crushing them over the head with this 300-pager that they're never going to be able to get through.
So it's 1-page executive summary, 3...
Let me start over.
Yeah.
No, it's a 1-page handout.
There you go. Okay.
A 3-page executive summary, and a 25-page report.
Got it.
And then as many appendices as you want. So if you have to talk about your methodology and it's going to take 25 pages, that's cool. It just goes in the appendix.
Nice. Now,
Right.
do you have any examples of those on your? Do you have any of those up on your website?
Yeah, I do. I have a blog post about this, and I actually have linked to this university in Australia. When I was down there giving workshops a couple of years ago, they were in the audience and they adopted the 1-3-25 model for the reporting that comes out of their department. And you can link to, you can explore like all of their 1-3-25s.
Oh, super cool.
Yeah.
Dashboards. I know I'm jumping all over the place here, but you're doing a great job following me. So, so what's new with dashboards? What have you been working on there?
Well, where we're going in the book is showing people how to make amazing dashboards inside Excel. And the reason that I want people to know how to do that is because, dashboards are such a sexy thing. Everybody thinks that they need to have one. Most of the time, they really don't know what it needs to look like or what should be on it. They just think it sounds like a good idea. And then we end up spending thousands of dollars on dashboard software. There are so many companies that want to sell you their dashboard software. And most of it is full of bad data visualization, and you can't customize it, right? Like you can't change the way that the bar chart looks. It's just going to be this ugly bar chart. So I want people to know that they have the power to make awesome interactive dashboards inside Excel, where you do have the ability to customize what your bar charts look like. So we're walking people through how to do that and how to make it interactive so that you can drill down into detail, or so that you can do things like, say, change the school. So if you've got a one-page dashboard that you have to generate for, your 25 schools in your district, you don't have to make 25 separate dashboards. You can just select the name of the school and the data will all change. So I want to show people how to make those shortcuts happen in their lives, because it'll save a lot of money without having to buy specialty software and the learning curve it takes to learn that new software that ultimately generally produces stuff that isn't too helpful. So that's where we're taking people.
Oh, nice. And it is pretty powerful when you not only can do it yourself, but I think it also forces you to understand it better. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, that's what's happening with a third party. You're just handing them your data, either in a CSV or an Excel file, and then they're doing that part of it. But yeah, it makes sense.
And I think another thing too, when you go through the process of making it internally, you end up forcing yourselves into questions like, how will we measure this metric? Where will the data come from? How often will we be updating this dashboard? Will this grow and to change over time, or will we always report just the current point in time? And those are the questions you need to be having internally. Those are the discussions you need to be figuring out so that you can actually make the most of the data that you have. And going through that process of making the dashboard yourself is going to help you with that.
And that's the hard part, but that's the real work. And I think that's probably why people are like, just give me a dashboard. Then they don't have to think about it.
Right. Exactly. The easy way out.
So I want to circle back a little bit to the handouts and thinking about, and this is something I've been struggling with a little bit, is in terms of so you have the handout, but then leaving people a place to write or doing some sort of structured notes or something like that to help with people with processing during a workshop or a presentation. What's your thinking on that right now?
Yeah, so I have had a good deal of success with making a handout. I'll tell you honestly, Mike, my workshops are so big and there's so many materials that we've kind of evolved this into a workbook. And I'm saying it in that sense because some pages are like a one-page handout and other pages are more like a notes catcher, right? Where you're going to write in your own stuff. And on those pages, I usually have them pretty blank, but it'll be a new section like, okay, this part of the workshop, we're going to talk about qualitative data visualization. So on that page in the workbook, I'll have a thumbnail of a key slide so that they have some kind of, visual connection to what they see on the screen when they go look at their notes later. I might have like 3 or 4 of my key points written in on the side, stuff I don't want them to forget. I'll put URLs nobody wants to copy a URL off of the slide. So I'll put that stuff on the page, but the majority of the page, like 80% of it, would be a blank place for them to take notes, to draw pictures, stuff like that. And I orient people to the fact that this is going to happen at the beginning of the workshop, so that they know they need to go about taking these notes as they go. So I find that to be pretty effective.
I like that. And I like that idea of, it's a good reminder to tell people what to do with it at the beginning. It seems so simple, like you just assume people would know. But I've given presentations before where I didn't say it explicitly, and a couple of people were kind of like, they either were choosing not to follow along or didn't know what to do. So that point's well taken. Now,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's one more thing that has been cropping up for me lately about handouts and notes that I haven't completely figured out. But more and more of the companies I work for are going paperless. So asking them to print my workbook, which is like, 10 pages for each person in the workshop, they're kind of like, well, first of all, it's bad for the environment. Second of all, it's an extra cost. So people are looking for electronic digital versions of the handouts. And I think that means ultimately two things. One, I'm going to have to convert my handouts into Google Docs where people can just like type directly. Or, if we did the slide handout that we were talking about before, and you give people the PowerPoint, they can actually write in the notes section themselves and just take their own notes right there. That might be another idea.
That's not a bad idea. I guess I would worry about the size of the file. Like, would it be too big? I don't know. I also have and maybe this is me starting to get old or continuing to get old, but I have a really strong belief that you internalize more and learn things better when you put pen to paper versus keyboarding.
I 100% agree with you. I mean, I'm sure there's some research behind that. Every once in a while, there'll be somebody in one of my workshops who's taking electronic notes, and the whole room is like, all I hear is clicking and clacking the entire day. And it can be really hard and distracting for everybody when you're on your keyboard. But I think you're right. It's that act of writing it out that does something.
Well, and I wonder if, and I think you're absolutely right. There is research about it. In other words, well, research says, yeah. Well, we'll just make it up. But I'm as I think about it, we can keyboard so much faster than we can handwrite. I wonder if that's a piece of it. Like the writing slows you down and forces you to think a little bit more. I don't know.
That might be it. Also, like, I want people to be able to sketch and draw. And when I walk around, I see people doing that in their notes, which I know that we can get there. We're almost there digitally, but not quite, where we have pens that can help us with that. But I do think that that's a key part of note taking, is being able to sketch.
And I like to use the note catcher too. I've kind of done a hybrid where the big thick handout is electronic, like kind of an ebook, and then I'll do a one pager that I'll ask people to print out for everybody, one for everybody. And then that's the one I use where at different points during the presentation, I call it cognitive sorbet, like as a transition, like, jot down two things that we've done so far that you really want to remember, or, what's one thing that surprised you, to sort of force those breaks for processing time in the workshop. And that seems to work. I mean, some people get annoyed because they don't want to be told when and how to process, but I feel like it keeps me on track, and it also helps me manage their attention and focus a little bit.
Yeah, I like that idea. It's sort of consolidating some of the learning as you go, because otherwise, especially if your workshop is long and you're teaching them a lot, it can just feel like a whirlwind.
Right, and I think people start to get frustrated because then the cognitive overload kicks in and overwhelm, and you just can't even do it. Huh. How about let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk, let's go into data viz nerd world here. So you said you were looking at some different kinds of charts, or, what's occupying your time and your thoughts related to data visualization specifically?
Yeah, well, at this point, we're really thinking a lot more about qualitative visualization. I think that the world in general, and especially at Evergreen Data, we have focused so much on quantitative visualization and making sure those charts look great and they're really understandable. And I think it's time for us to apply some of those same ideas about great design and awesome titles and great use of color to qualitative visualization. And I think this is important because when I ask people, are you collecting qualitative data? They'll often say, "Oh, no, we aren't even running a survey this year," because they think qualitative data is just the open-ended comments on a survey, and it's so much more than that. I mean, I don't really know where the boundaries are, to be honest with you, but everybody that I work with has some kind of diagram, and the diagrams all suck.
Yes, I agree with you.
And I think of that as qualitative, right? Because we're trying to visualize a flow or a process or an organization of some kind of structure, and it needs so much love. And I think the same kind of design thinking and field development we've done for quantitative viz needs to apply in the qualitative world too. So we've been trying to develop new ways of qualitative visualizations, or digging up old ways that maybe got mentioned in a journal in 1990 and nobody's looked at it since then. So we've been really doing a lot of work on getting those ideas together.
Do you have like an example, like if you think of some piece of data or like a context that might help people visualize a little bit?
Yeah. So one of my favorite new diagrams is something called a spectrum display. It's so cool, and I have a blog post on it, so we can put this down in the show notes because it is one of those things that you kind of have to see. But it appeared in this journal article that was about, it's old, so it was about when a library first got computers. And they wanted to understand how the library patrons were going to use the computers. And so they did an observational study, which is qualitative in nature. And if you just reported it the way we typically do, it would be just reams of paper with like patron 1 did this, and then patron 2 did this, and you'd want to die after like 3 patrons, So in this spectrum display, it's sort of like a half circle with these intersections that are sectioned off into how much time people spent. So it's like under 16 minutes, 16 to 24 minutes, etc. And then the half circle is broken out into rings by the things people did in that time, like pay bills or email or, just search. And then each patron is shown in there, and there are dots basically at their intersections. So you could see that patron 13 was there for 16 to 34 minutes and spent that time searching and emailing. So it's a really compact way to show a lot of what would otherwise be narrative data. So you can see the actual visual of this when you look at the blog post and see how it works. But once you see it, and especially after you hear the explanation of how to read it, it makes so much sense. And so we're looking at stuff like that was shown once in a journal article so long ago, and we're bringing those things back to life and trying to popularize them.
Well, and that's interesting, and that kind of takes me to another place. So, arguably, you're one of the experts out there around presentations, data visualization, slide design, all that. So, where do you go to continue? How do you continue learning?
I learn from my clients. Because I have pushed this idea that we can do anything so hard that people will ask me for just the most ridiculous stuff. And I'm like, no, we can't make Excel do that. And then I'm like, maybe we can. Or I'll have clients who have qualitative studies and want us to figure out a way to visualize those. Or, I have the Data Visualization Academy, where it's like our online workshop, and people are in there all year long, and we're always putting out new tutorials and teaching people how to do new stuff, and we have great discussions in there. We just had one earlier this week that made me think so hard I actually have to consult myself and like sit down and look back at the research again on this. So I love that. I love that my engagement with my clients and my customers is the place that keeps me pushing.
That is super cool. And if people want to find out more about the work you and Evergreen Data are doing, where should they go?
So the blog is a great place. I'll also put a link, I'll send you a link, Mike, to the Academy down in the show notes because we open up enrollment for that twice a year. We're going to open it up again on October 1st, and we only open it to 100 people at a time. So if that's something people are interested in, they'll want to get that on their radar pretty soon.
Oh, super cool. Well, Stephanie, I want to be respectful of your time, and half hour seems to be the magic place for a podcast for small bites. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time again, and maybe we can do it again in less than or fewer than 3 years.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the School Leadership Show, a podcast for aspiring and practicing school leaders. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to me, Mike, at schoolleadershipshow.com. And please consider rating the podcast in iTunes and leaving a comment. And definitely pass the show along to your colleagues.